What's this song supposed to be?
I don't know, but they are utterly butchering it.
Sorry, I do love jazz, but I've never trusted an Englishman to play it.
Do you like to dance?
Father will hate him on sight. He's cleverer than him, and he's black.
I would hate to walk away from you knowing that I wouldn't see you again.
Well, then you must. I must see me again.
Are you insane? White, British, and what about your people?
My grandfather was a king. I am his heir. I have a responsibility to return home to my people. I will never achieve anything worthwhile if I leave my heart here.
If you choose to marry the leader of an African nation, you will be responsible for the downfall of the British Empire in Africa.
You choose a life of insults and shame.
I know what you're asking, what it means. And yes, I will marry you.
Over 2 decades of preparing you to be our king. This is how you face me.
My home, our home.
Who do you think will accept you? As if it were your right to be our queen.
You will renounce any right to the throne.
Malnutrition, malaria. There is so much that I need to do.
We need him more than you. Let him go.
We've misjudged this, haven't we?
I am told you no longer wish for me to honor my duty as your king because of the color of the wife I have chosen.
This could make your country ungovernable.
We have concluded you should be exiled for life.
I can't do this alone anymore.
Find your way back to me, Seretse. Find your way back.
The whole world is watching.
She's stronger than either of us suspected. She is a woman who is loved.
I am ready to serve you because I love my people. I love this land. But I love my wife.
Thanks, everybody. Let's hear it one more time for this group right here. Beautiful film. Thanks so much for being here. Congratulations on a really beautiful achievement. I thought the film was wonderful, and whether you meant to or not, because I imagine you started making it about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, you touched on some pretty significant themes and topics that are being talked about right now.
Completely. I mean, we had no idea when we were making this film that events would unfold across the world in the way that they have. And I say across the world because in the UK, you know, we went through Brexit, which has had an incredible impact on us, but also the things that are happening in your country, we could never know. We knew it would have resonance. We always knew it would have resonance with a contemporary period, but this is something else.
Well, let's talk about how you first got involved with the story.
Well, David and I go back a very long time.
How long?
Well,
start there.
I think I was about 3 when I first met David. So it was about 20 years ago. No. No, I met David about 18, 19 years ago. David had completed drama school. I was writing my first TV series for the BBC, which I was also producing. And David took on one of the roles. We had 27 lead characters. It was a long-running TV series, and David was one of those characters.
So out of the 27 leads, you became friends with David. That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other people on the show who are friends as well.
Yeah, definitely. And many that you know here today in America, which is great. Many who went on to build careers here. So cut to 18 years later, and David and I have obviously kept in touch. We pass each other mainly on airplanes and in airports. And I have just completed promoting my last film, Belle, in the... Thank you. Thank you for that. In the UK and in the US, and I'm having a little bit of time off. And somebody who was very determined was ringing my phone quite incessantly at home. And I was thinking, oh, gosh, give me a night off. I thought it was coming from America, but it was a call from Africa. David was shooting Queen of Katwe out there. And so I finally answered the phone, and it was David who wanted to talk to me about this project, and in particular a book he had read many years ago, written by Susan Williams, Color Bar, which is the book that our film is based on, and asked me if I had heard the story of Ruth and Seretse, Ruth Williams and Seretse Khama, and to my shame, I had not. And the reason why I was ashamed is because I am the child of immigrants who were raised in a colony, saw that colony become independent, and I knew what independence meant to the people of the various countries in Africa. And I thought I knew most of the stories that had to do with, countries that had become independent in Africa. I just had never heard of this couple.
Which is weird, right? Because I had never heard of this couple either.
No,
and this
no.
seems to be at least the most symbolically resonant of those stories in that century. And it doesn't feel like it's told that often.
I think there are probably a couple of reasons for that. Probably more, but a couple that I've pinpointed, which is one is that, the couple seem to very much focus on their time and the things that they achieved once they were allowed back to Africa. And their period of where Seretse was exiled and all of the difficulty that we see in the film, they didn't really seem to have spoken to their children about very much, or people around them. They seem to have focused on the positive. I think the other thing is that we're only just now coming into a period where we're telling these stories from a different, sorry everyone, from a different point of view. Oftentimes the stories were told via those who were seeing it through the empire's eyes in some ways. And so, they say that history is also often told through those who had the power at the time. And of course, Seretse became very powerful, but in that time, he had a fight, he had a challenge, and he had a struggle. And so I think history is told, they're not going to tell this story way back because they lost. This couple triumphed in so many ways. This love didn't just stand up to the power of 2 continents, 3 countries, a whole empire, but it triumphed over it, and that's incredible.
What kind of research did the two of you do? I mean, there's incredible footage of the couple. There's interviews that you can find on YouTube, but their family is still quite active in Botswana, in politics, and leading the country. Did you meet with them as well?
To say their family is still active in politics would be an understatement. Their son is the current president of Botswana. I mean, Susan Williams' book, Calabar, is an amazing resource for, it's a very well-researched book, and as Amma said, it was the primary means by which I first happened upon the story. Similar to Amma, despite being a person of African descent, I knew nothing about this story, and I completely agree with her that there are fairly insidious reasons as to why. But once I did come upon that book, there were several of the family members who were still alive at the time. Naledi, who was Seretse Khama's sister, was still alive. In fact, she was alive just up until we started shooting the film, and so our writer was able to talk to her a fair bit. Muriel, who was Ruth Williams' sister, was also still alive and actually had moved to Uganda herself. She was alive right up until... Oh, I'm so sorry. I said Uganda, Botswana, and she was alive right up until we started shooting.
Filming.
Yeah. So, and the family members have been incredibly supportive. The president, their son, has been wonderfully. He visited us on set. Was very complimentary of us playing his parents. Yes, flew by helicopter to come and see us, as you do. Botswana has just celebrated its 50th anniversary of its independence, so the film has been a big part of the celebrations.
Rosamund, talk about what you learned from Ruth's family, because you do a wonderful job when Ruth first gets to Bechuanaland, I think it's referred to? Bechuanaland, excuse me. You do this wonderful job of conveying someone who's attempting to be strong in the face of what is completely unexpected for her. And it just reads on your face beautifully. And I'm wondering sort of what you carried with you that you learned from her family or in your research that helped with that.
I think it's very interesting because the film's set in 1947 and you have to kind of eradicate all your modern understanding and all our kind of global awareness. Because really what Ruth had to go on was Seretse's conversation about the country and her atlas, where she could see some geographical structure, but, there wouldn't have been photographs she could have looked at, or she had pictures in her imagination, obviously, but she was a girl from Southeast London. She had a fairly sheltered upbringing. Her her horizons had been broadened by the Second World War and getting to do play a very important role during the war. But, you know, she wasn't a well-traveled woman. And in a way, I think an audience will meet Bechuanaland very much through Ruth's eyes because, you know, it's quite easy sometimes to identify with the person who's feeling most uncomfortable in a situation to help you understand the new as an audience. But, you know, we were very privileged. We shot in Botswana. You know, you don't know how many films are never shot in the place they're meant to be shot in. And that was a huge production value because, you know, the local people were playing the people of Botswana. So when they all crowded around the car, peering in and, you know, some celebrating our arrival, some greeting it with suspicion, I mean, it felt about as real as it could be. So thank you for your compliments, but I, you know, I just kind of had to live it, and it was done for me, really.
I'm going to compliment the three of you once again with this next question, which is you know you pull off something that I think is probably one of the hardest things to convey in a movie, which is a love at first sight scene. I can't imagine as an actor or as a director shooting or performing a love at first sight scene. I would just be filled with questions as to whether or not it's working. Are we conveying it? Is the audience going to get this?
You did ask me some questions.
Because people don't believe in it these
You were
days,
like,
you know.
I was like, trust, I promise you, it's going to be there. But I mean, I think they did an incredible job
agree.
In that moment. I had love at first sight, as you two both know. So I believed in it. Of course, you don't know if it's going to translate on screen. You can't know until you get to the edit. I felt it between them in the moment. David and I talked a lot, and we always knew that we didn't want this love to be exoticized. I was like, we're both in interracial relationships, and it was like, I'm not having this love exoticized in any way. And so,
how do you find that loves are usually exoticized in film?
It's really oftentimes, or in life, sometimes with this sort of pejorative understanding that, you know, for instance, what I didn't want is for anybody to think Ruth had never spoken to a black man before, and so the first one that speaks to her is suddenly a curiosity, is suddenly interesting in some way, and that's what also drives her to go to Africa, as opposed to two souls finding each other. You know, she's not just intrigued by what he's saying, she hears him speak, but she's interested in how he's saying it, his whole demeanor. And I wanted it to feel like she falls in love with his mind, that's the first thing that pulls her attention, that through all these conversations in the room, this voice, something in his voice, something in what he's saying, something in the way that he's saying it, is what captures her attention. And I love the look that Rosamund gives, that we have in the film, you know, that kind of semi-double take that she gives, and then you're just, for me, completely drawn in. You know she can't take her eyes off of him in that moment. And then the awkwardness that David channels, as Surette say, and just, you know he's feeling something that he's not used to feeling, and he doesn't know why. And I guess that's what happens when there's love at first sight. You question it and you challenge it. You know, he questions it, she goes with it. She goes with that feeling. And then the rest is history, I guess.
I don't want to detour too fast, but you said it, and I think it's a point of interest for everybody now. What was love at first sight like for you?
It was like that moment in many ways. I mean, we slowed it down a tiny bit in the film. We didn't take it down to real slow motion. But I do remember seeing my husband walk across a room, and he's beautiful to me, but I'm sure to all of you, he would be just a very ordinary guy. And you know, and he took off his tie. I remember him taking off his tie because we were having a business meeting, and we'd never met before. And he said he took off his tie because he didn't want to appear stiff. But to me, it was kind of like Superman taking off his tie in slow motion. And yeah, I just knew in that moment that I would be his wife.
Maybe I should have taken off my tie in the film.
You know, I made you take off a lot, David. David was like, do I really have to have my vest off in this shot? What do you call a vest in America? A vest? A vest? Like an underwear thing. Okay, yeah. So he was like, do I have to show my bare chest? I was like, yeah.
Yes.
You do.
That was the answer.
David, what were your questions in shooting that scene? Rosamund, what were yours? Because as I said, I just imagine that that's a tough scene to wrap your head around as an actor, because it's just a look. There's no exposition there. There's nothing explaining how you feel in that moment, but you have to convey a lot.
Well, I mean, when you read the book and when you hear about them, it was clear that they fell in love very quickly. And I would argue that was maybe the only way this could have happened. If they'd overthought it, they would not have done it, considering, you know, what the fallout would be, as they're bright people, they would know that if they overthought it. But, you know, we live in an age, a fairly cynical age, an age where, you know, often lust is wrapped up in the idea of love when it comes to films. This, in my opinion, was true love. And so for me, you know, partly with the producer head, you're going, let's cover our backs. Are people going to buy love at first sight? Before, you know, Rosamund and I had done any of the scenes together, you know, is the chemistry between us going to read enough that an audience will buy into that? You just don't know, is the truth of the matter. And it's such a pivotal moment, because at the end of the day, what we were trying to do with this film was to have it be a love story. Yes, it has a political backdrop, but if we're going to have these two people fall in love very quickly, that moment has got to resonate. And as Amma said, she was very clear about what she wanted it to be, and she was absolutely right in pursuing the magic of that moment. And thankfully, when we started doing scenes together, it was just feeling right, feeling very natural, feeling like we believed what we were playing, and so you hope that the audience therefore would. And what you see in the film is what we all hoped it would be, which is a moment that is fairly immediate, but resonates enough that you believe, you know, in how these two people feel about each other.
Awesome.
I mean, I remember when we had some long discussions and you felt that you wanted them to say more in that first dance scene, that there should be a moment where we had a conversation that at least connected our interests more. And then, you know, Amma, you were always resolute that there would be enough. You know, you just need one joke. I mean, there's one joke. They find each other. They find a common sense of humor. I mean, it's not a sort of cracker of a joke, but it's a, you know, it's a joke.
I tried, you know.
And it's that moment of recognition. I've always thought love is that. It's recognizing somebody. Yes. And I feel that's what we had.
Kindred spirits. And I love the idea of two people who are seemingly so far away from each other in terms of the way they look, where they come from, you know, how they were raised, different class, both of them, and yet they were kindred spirits.
Talk about, I brought this up to you in the green room, and one of the things that the film does so wonderfully is that it has a political backdrop, but it's never heavy-handed about it. But when you really think about it at the end of the day, in many ways, it's about how the economic interests of a colonial empire sort of have an interest in maintaining segregation and a kind of racial hostility among people in a country for the purpose of their own economic gains. Yeah. It's a major part of the film. When you're crafting this story in the script stage and while shooting it, how do you know how much is too much? When is it heavy-handed? When should it be about the love story, and when should it be specifically about the political backdrop?
Well, I think before I came on board, the script had gone through various guises in terms of the way that all of that was balanced. And when David sent me the script as it stood at that point, I think there was a sort of common belief amongst the producers and the executive producers that, you know, this really should be completely a love story, and 100%, you know, the politics should really be reduced as far as possible.
Which would essentially just, sorry to interrupt, but which would essentially just end up making it look like white people are against it, and this couple loves each other, and that's it, and not probably touching on any of the actual reasons for...
Well, but I think the difficulty in that is that you don't understand the power of the love that this couple have unless you understand what it stood up to and what it triumphed over. And so, you know, when I first read the script and I said, yeah, David, yeah, thanks, I'll get back to you at the end of the week. And he was like, no, now. I need notes now. And so I remember saying to him, like, I kind of get it. There are manipulations I would like here and there, But I don't think we can tell this story without going relatively deeply into the politics. But the key here is always making sure that you do it through the prism of the couple's love. So, you know, there's one particular moment where we step out from convention, you know, from script convention. I love script rules, because it was always important that we saw this story through the couple's eyes. But there's one moment where we don't do that, and that's when you see the politicians walking through the corridors of power at Westminster, and suddenly it's all unfolded to you in this one scene, exactly what this couple's love is up against. And Prime Minister Attlee of the Labour Party at the time is saying, is about to unfold all of those reasons to you. Neither of the couple are there or watching it. But at least in that moment, he starts off by saying, if I let that king or any other black king, you know, sleep on the same soil as a white woman, you know, if I let them sleep in the same bed, so even though they're not there, you know, he starts off by expressing the story or his reasons through their love. And suddenly you then realize uranium, atomic bomb programs, Cold War, Starling. Suddenly you realize all of this in a very short space of time. But it's important that you understand that this is what the couple's love is up against, as opposed to just an independent political statement of the times. So, you know, what I explained to David that for me was that it always had to come through the prism of the couple's love, and that was very important. I had a question from a journalist very recently that the kind of brutality of colonialism wasn't really expressed in the film. And I explained to her that that's because it would be a different film. If you see the story through the couple's eyes, you only see what they see to a large extent. And he was a king. But it also depends what you call brutal, because I think that moment where he gets out of the car with Ruth and she stands and she stares and sees that sign that says whites only, and he says, I have special dispensation as a king, but we use a different entrance, is brutal. I think that's brutal. When she says, I know we have this at home, I know we have these signs, no black, no Irish, no dogs, but I didn't expect it in your own country. That to me is, it's a brutal fact of the times, and that's tough.
Well, I think it speaks a lot to the sort of conditioning of what we assume the brutality of racism and institutional racism is and looks like.
And how it feels.
And how it feels, but based off of the stories that have been told over the course of the last 4 or 5 decades, which generally focus on physical brutality and rather on the sort of institutional brutality.
And how you condition a set of minds, a society's minds, to simply accept it. Except Seretse didn't.
And of course, the interesting thing about Bechuanaland at the time was that they'd asked for protectorate status. That's the interesting thing, is that they had felt that the strife in their country in the era of Seretse's grandfather had led them to ask for the involvement of Britain. And then, you know, this sort of, you think, well, how really did that happen? You know, how did it come about that Britain accepted that role and then ended up bringing all this division and hatred into that country that it was setting out to protect? It is a very...
Money.
Money.
Yeah.
Let's open it up to the audience for some questions. Who has it right here?
Hi. Good to meet you guys. So given the political backdrop that Ricky mentioned earlier, how did the people of Botswana actually react to you guys shooting in their village and featuring them in the film?
Well, you know, the really surprising thing for me in shooting in Botswana was how many people in Botswana also didn't know the story, which, you know, I deem to be a real legacy of any colonial situation. They knew more about David Livingstone than they knew about Seretse Khama. That was a really surprising thing. So for us, even though for all of us, we didn't know about this story before we were embarking on making this film, it became doubly important that this very incredible story was going to get to be told, because, you know, as a person of Nigerian descent, myself, Amma is of Ghanaian descent, you know, I have huge pride in my African heritage, and I'm a big believer in the fact that if we know who we are, and we can let each other know who we are, and if we can recognize how alike we are. That is what ultimately breaks down prejudice. To not know who you are and to therefore consistently think that we are so different, we are so divided, that's what enables prejudice to take and for, you know, some of what we're dealing with right now to be pervasive.
And I would also add to, because we were talking about the economic interests in sort of maintaining prejudice, I think there are those that are at play right now as well, and I think that's one of the great ways that the film has a lot of resonance right now. Yeah. Next question.
Hi guys.
Hi.
I'm thrilled. This sounds wonderful. I'm so thrilled that people here are going to get to see some of our heritage. What I just wanted to, and I'm a fan of love, what I wanted to ask you is how you appear to me is you seem so graceful and dignified in your being and in the way you act. And I just wonder sometimes whether in this kind of overhyped, overstated, you know, rah-rah in America, whether people get it, whether they tune into who you're being.
Whether Americans get dignity? No,
Okay,
that's not what she said.
Listen.
Stop it. All of you, stop it.
Some of us are trying, okay? The majority of us are.
Now.
I'll let someone else answer that question, shall I?
67, 68 million of us are trying to get dignity.
Do you mean in terms of the film? Do they get the film or just get it?
I mean,
get it.
Kind of both. I mean, just who you are for me and the way you speak, the way you act is just a kind of understated, like a graciousness, like a dignity.
He's kingly, isn't he?
Yes.
He's kingly. He's regal.
But David is of royal family.
And of course, we can extend it over to everything in the world, you know, how people are. So,
I mean, I think it's, you know, it's not a restrained story by any means. You know, it's an incredibly passionate film. I mean, it's passion that drives the film, and it's, you know, it's politics brokered by love. I mean, it really is, and I don't think you can fail to be moved by that. I mean, I think Seretse Khama, you know, had tremendous dignity, and he was a real, you know, one of the main conflicts of the film is how do you serve your people, but also serve yourself, you know, be true to yourself.
And dignity, I mean, dignity definitely for me, and I know it was the case for David, it was part of the draw of the film, knowing that we could present an African man on screen with humility, dignity, education, you know, a broader world view, you know, all of the things that we're rarely allowed to see on screen in terms of an African gentleman, was something that Seretse Khama embodied and something that David so beautifully channeled. I just wanted to just go back and make a comment on a question that you had asked earlier in terms of, you know, Rosamund and kind of channeling the Ruth moments in terms of facing the challenges that Ruth had to. And one of the things that I think I've never said in front of Rosamund before is what was so beautiful about her taking on board the character and responding to the character is that she did so in a way that reminded me of how I imagined Ruth would have taken on the situation. So with a kind of quiet dignity, but guts and courage, because I think one of the things that you were talking about with Ruth, and Ruth being you know, someone who was an ambulance driver during the war and dedicated herself to the war effort in many ways, and existing in a time where men were taken out of the equation because they were, you know, out at war, and so women were given opportunity
like
that
a league of their own.
Wouldn't normally be given exactly opportunity. Is that in order to do so, one had to exhibit great courage. You know, saving fighter pilots in crashed planes in your ambulance is a really courageous thing to do. So we kind of have all of the clues that Ruth was courageous and gutsy and was willing to dedicate herself outside of herself. What was really brilliant, I can remember this one particular day where Rosamund has to shoot the scene where she passes out, and I had literally, you know, and the idea was that the scene showed that she was not only disliked by the Africans at the time, but also disliked by the white people that were living in Palape at the time. And I had stayed up literally all night trying to work out how the hell we were going to shoot this scene, and were we going to CGI the mattress, the huge mattress that I was going to put there for her to fall on. You know, how we were going to do it. And I remember Rosamund just appearing in rehearsals and just saying, I'll just do it. And then she did. She just collapsed onto these rocks, and over and over and over again. And so there was a passion about her in terms of her response to the script, but also then a kind of dedication to that courage and that guts as well, that I think, you know, she approached it as an actress, I think, in the way that I imagine Ruth would have approached the role of the journey, I should say, to Africa and becoming the wife of Seretse. I just wanted to drop that in.
Thank you, Amma.
I'll add to that and just say that what I think adds to the courageousness and the guts is that you also don't shy away from any of the fear that she might have been feeling in that time as well. And you see that in your eyes in moments where she is acting courageous and doing something that takes guts, but you can still see a fair amount of fear and confusion in her eyes.
There's vulnerability.
Exactly, which I think is so important and adds so much depth to the character.
And I think in relation to what you said, what we've just been talking about is the definition of dignity, actually. It's not about being British. Yes, maybe it has something to do with being royal and there's a regality that comes with that, but dignity, the ability to love sacrificially, these are things that I think are very dignified, to think about your fellow man first. You know, another role I was blessed enough to play was Dr. King, and he also was an incredibly dignified human being, and I think it stems from this desire to step out of your door each day and think of other people before yourself. That, in and of itself, is something that gives us, as humanity, dignity to look after each other. And I think that, you know, one of the things I admire most about both Seretse and Ruth is that, yes, they put a lot into their love for each other, but they also put a lot into loving their community, their country, their society, that went on to be a better place for the love that they shared and the love that they had for that country, which is modern-day Botswana, which is a very different country that it otherwise would have been without them as part of the leadership.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question. Who has the question? Hi.
Oh, hi. I guess it's girl crush time, because I saw Belle, and it is beautiful. I encourage everyone to go and see that on DVD. And
thank you.
Coming from that, just the story of love, you're able to eke so much passion out of a handhold, really. And that's what I'm kind of so excited to see in this. How do you, just beyond just the belief, the way that you can capture just passion through a look, it's something that adds to what we currently see in cinema, that love-lust conflation. So how exactly do you do that as a director, and what kind of notes do you give to get that out of these wonderful actors?
Well, first of all, I think it has to be supported by the story that you choose to tell in the first place, and then supported by the script that evolves and is worked on, you know, tirelessly to create a foundation for the actors. But I think if you have built up the circumstances around that look well enough, because the look can't come in isolation, it's not an island, it has to be connected to a set of circumstances around your characters. And if that is built correctly, then the simple talent of your actors will allow that moment to work. And, you know, I was very lucky with my very first film, A Way of Life. I worked with, you know, untrained actors who were not experienced but had a beautiful raw talent. You know, with Belle, I was able to work with an ensemble of wonderful thespians. And with David and Rosamund, I just have, you know, beautiful British talent that came together and were experienced enough to be able to handle moments like that. And what is key is understanding the script, understanding the story, understanding the nature of the characters and the relationship. And again, you know, people ask me again, oh, you know, David was already on board, you know, he brought me on board, but in casting Rosamund, how was that? And I said, you know, the thing I worried about most, and I don't even think I told you this, was having to wash any actress that might come on board of any ideas, again, of exoticizing, and the idea that an actress that might come on board wouldn't understand the purity of this love and would be looking for things, you know, striving for exotic elements. And of course, we didn't have that with Rosamund at all, because when she read the script, she immediately understood what it meant for two people to fall in love. And I think when you understand that, those moments I'm not saying they don't take work, they do, and we do work in the edit as well. And, you know, I'll try and push things along to bring something else out in a moment, maybe make the look a little bit longer, or perhaps it needs to be a little bit shorter. But essentially, it's team effort. It's a collaboration.
And you guys did an incredible job. I think we'll leave it there. How can people see United Kingdom? When is it? When can people see it?
It's out in limited release here in New York and in LA this Friday, and across the country through February and March.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
it's a
you
beautiful
all.
film. Thank you.
Thank you.